What we're going to talk about in this video is the relationship between the size of a cell and what's called its surface area to volume ratio. And it turns out these two aspects of a cell are inversely correlated, and that has some pretty significant implications for the life of the cell. So let me recommend that before you watch this video, you read through this section in Chapter 3 on cell size and surface area to volume ratio, and then come back and watch this video. And of course, you can replay the video as often as you like. So when you look at these two spheres, imagine that they're both two different cells. The one on top has a smaller radius. It would be a smaller cell. The one on the bottom has a bigger radius. It would be considered a bigger cell. Which of these two spheres do you think has a greater surface area relative to its volume? In other words, a higher surface area to volume ratio. Why don't you go ahead and click pause now and think it through. When you're ready to continue the discussion, go ahead and start up again. Okay, which of these spheres has a greater surface area relative to its volume? In order to answer that question, we're going to have to do just a little bit of math. So let's take a look at this. In the sphere on top, we've got a radius of 1 micrometer. 1 micrometer radius leads to a surface area of 12.6 square micrometers and a volume of 4.2 cubic micrometers. Now let's increase our size by increasing the radius. We'll double the radius. We've got a much larger cell now on bottom, and we see that our surface area jumps from 12.6 square micrometers up to 50.3 square micrometers. That's an increase of about fourfold just by doubling the radius. But look what happens to the volume. The volume jumps from 4.2 cubic micrometers all the way up to 33.5 cubic micrometers, or a volume increase of approximately eightfold. You see, the volume, because it's a cubic function of the radius, is going to be more sensitive to changes in size than the surface area. The surface area is a square function of the radius. So as the radius increases, the surface area will increase, but not as much as the volume is going to increase. So what you see is that in our smaller cell, with our radius of 1 micron, we've got a surface area to volume ratio of 3. When we increase the radius, our surface area increases, but not as much as our volume increases, and therefore our ratio decreases to 1.5. So there's that idea I was talking about at the beginning, that cell size and the surface area to volume ratio are inversely proportional. A smaller cell has a bigger surface area to volume ratio than a larger cell. If you need to, pause here and think through the math, make sure this concept makes sense. All right, let's take a look at this in more realistic terms. What we've got here is a scanning electron micrograph from the Max Planck Institute in Germany of a human intestinal epithelial cell. That's that big blue globular structure. And it has attached to it a few falsely colored Salmonella typhimurium cells. Salmonella typhimurium can cause salmonellosis and other salmonella diseases. What you see are very tiny cells of salmonella attached to this one large eukaryotic cell. So based on what we just talked about, okay, which of these two, the prokaryote or the eukaryote, is going to have a higher surface area to volume ratio? If you're not sure, click pause. If you got somebody sitting next to you, ask them, talk about this, and make sure you get it right. Which of these two is going to have a higher surface area to volume ratio? Okay, hopefully you chatted this through with one of your friends and you both agree that the salmonella is going to have a higher surface area to volume ratio because it is a smaller cell. The smaller the cell, the bigger that surface area relative to its volume. Okay, everybody understand this principle? If not, go back and replay this until you get it. What we're going to do now is think about what the implications are biologically of this high surface area to volume ratio that we see among the prokaryotes. The first thing that this does is it creates an increased rate of nutrient and waste exchange. Let's think about that. The smaller you are, the more surface area you have relative to your volume. Your volume is where nutrients are consumed and where wastes are produced. Your surface area is where they are exchanged. When you have a smaller volume relative to a larger surface area, you can more rapidly bring in new nutrients and excrete old wastes. This then leads to increased metabolic rates. If you can bring in nutrients more quickly, your metabolic rates are going to be quicker. If you can get rid of inhibitory waste compounds, your metabolic rates are going to be quicker. And then the more rapid your rates are, the more rapid your growth rates are going to be. So smaller organisms exchange nutrients and wastes more rapidly, and therefore their metabolism is more rapid, and therefore their overall growth rates are more rapid. What does this mean? It means that in nature, microorganisms can be very opportunistic. That means that they can adjust their metabolism depending on environmental changes to adapt to those changes much more quickly than eukaryotic cells can. And because of this rapid metabolism, rapid growth, and this opportunistic ability to adjust their metabolism to changing environmental conditions, microorganisms can have a huge impact on the chemistry of natural ecosystems, things like a soil or a water or the human body, wherever these microbes happen to live. All right, the third and final implication that I want us to think through is that these fast growth rates, coupled with the high population numbers, and let me back up and say here that, for example, a shovel full of topsoil has more live bacteria in it than all human beings on planet Earth. Right? Very, very high population numbers, coupled with fast growth rates, means more rapid mutation accumulation within the population. Right? Mutations are most often induced during cell division, DNA replication, when DNA polymerase makes mistakes, it makes substitutions. And therefore, the more numbers of cells that are dividing and the more rapidly they're dividing, that leads to more rapid accumulation of those mutations, which then means more potential, a greater potential for adaptation to changing environmental conditions. So in point number 2, we said that microbes are really good at adapting to changing environmental conditions from a metabolic standpoint. But it also turns out that as a whole population, microorganisms are excellent at adapting to changing environmental conditions through genetic mutation as well. All right, I want you to go back through this again, think through it one more time, make sure that each of the statements, each of the assertions that we've made makes perfect sense to you, that you understand the implications of a high surface area to volume ratio biologically, and you understand the math rationale behind the inverse relationship between the size of a cell and its surface area to volume ratio.